Neighborhood and community disorganization have a significant negative impact on youth. By transforming bland or blighted walls into inspirational center points reflective of the surrounding community, the Purposeful Placemaking project is really transforming how children, their families, and neighborhood residents view their community. United Way is pleased to be part of this project, and we appreciate the many other organizations, including but certainly not limited to Erie's public schools, the Blue Coats, the local artists, businesses who have donated their walls, as well as the local residents who have welcomed the projects into their neighborhoods. But this is just the beginning. We'll be back here next year with many more completed murals to celebrate with you. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Erie Arts and Culture Executive Director Patrick Fisher, who will share a comprehensive presentation on purposeful placemaking. Patrick?
I want to start by saying I really appreciate the accolades, but it's by no means a solo act. We have Devonna Paisley here, who is a member of the Erie Arts and Culture team, as well as Casey Coratori. I want to recognize the team effort that goes into an initiative like this, including Ethan Hayden, Jade Mitchell, and Nat for their work in this initiative. We also have a board that stands behind us, and we do have our board chair here today, Tana Hunter, so I want to recognize the board's contributions as well. If you could join me in recognizing them. And we have a really great audience today, and I want to recognize some of the folks that are in this audience. We do have members of our artistic community who have either served as lead artists or artist assistants on this first leg of the initiative. If you're an artist who has participated in this project, if you could please raise your hand. We also have several key funders of this initiative, including the City of Erie. We have the Erie Community Foundation and Erie Insurance, as well as Linda Graff in this room. If you all could please raise your hand and be acknowledged as well. And it's quite, it means something that we're here today to gather, because this is actually where the initiative started. Not just through our conversation with the United Way, but in 2020 when we created our first mural on a walking route. And it was unintentional at that point in time. We had an opportunity with artists from Miami, Monel Pierre-Louise, to create a mural in memorial of the late Carla Hughes. And we had some artists assist Monel in that project. Brian, who's up front, Antonio, and I see Precious in the back. They all worked on that project. And one of the things that I recognized as we were leading that project was how the students interacted with the muralists and the mural itself before and after school. And recognizing that there's an opportunity in place to really be strategic in how Erie Arts and Culture invests in its murals moving forward. And then we visited Flint, Michigan, and saw what they were doing around their mural initiative, which is what led to a conversation with the United Way. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this is modeled, what we've accomplished, and what rests ahead. But I do really want to thank you all for being here today. I also want to thank Grisey for their audio-visual assistance, as well as our Frank Media for helping us stream this today on Erie Arts and Culture and the United Way's Facebook page. So aesthetics of place. So this is really what this all started around, is aesthetics of place. And the Knight Foundation conducted a survey called The Souls of Community, where they looked at what are the things that lead to people making investments in community, whether they're making investments by moving there and being residents, or they're making investments by starting businesses there. And it's really easy to think that it would be some of these key things like quality of education, public safety, etc. But the truth is, those are baselines. We expect those things to work properly. They don't wow us and dazzle us when they work, and when they don't work, we obviously find ourselves quite frustrated. And it makes sense that aesthetics of place is one of the top-ranked, if not the top-ranked thing that leads to people making investments in place. Because think about yourselves and when you might go somewhere as a tourist. Think about your experiences. What do you take photos of? What do you share with others? You're not going there and talking about how great the Public Works Department fills potholes. You're not talking about how wonderful the Public Works Department is with making sure that you have fresh drinking water. You're taking pictures of the public parks and green spaces, the art, the museums, etc. So what we have focused on is how aesthetics of place lead to emotional bonds being created between people and the places and spaces they occupy, and then how those emotional bonds can lead to financial investments in the places that they occupy. And that's really been the founding principle for this initiative, as well as all of Erie Arts and Culture's placemaking initiatives. So our focus when we started on this was really the walking school bus and the safer walking routes. I'm not sure how many in this room know, but when the Erie's public schools found themselves in a little bit of a financial predicament, one of the ways that they helped pursue solvency was reducing bus services. And now if a student lives within 1.5 miles of the school they attend, they no longer receive bus services. And here in Erie, we're a four-season city. That means students are walking twice a day at a minimum in not only sunshine and beautiful weather like we have today, but also rain and snow and other, monumental conditions. And that was impacting attendance. And we know if a child is not in school, they're not learning, and that inevitably impacts their ability to perform in their adult life. So we wanted to really focus on collaborating with others and building upon existing initiatives, which is what led us to focus on the walking school routes. And it's our understanding through conversations with the public schools as well as the United Way that on average 35% of elementary school students are walking to school every day and 20% of middle school students are walking to school every day. And as Lori mentioned, the United Way had worked with some key collaborators to actually map out the safest walking routes. That was done with Gannon's GIS and Dr. Chris Magno, and they focused on some key things such as presence of hazards in the community, conditions of disrepair, traffic engineering data, as well as crime statistics. And they computed all of that to identify these are the safest routes that students can use if they are in fact walking to school each and every day. And those were the routes that we focused on when starting this initiative. And as you can see, there's 5 community schools, each having multiple routes. And our plan was 10 murals per each of the 5 community schools for a total of 50 murals over 2 years. So looking at these 5 community schools, we wanted to say, okay, this should be a transformational project. That means we need to have a baseline on what are the conditions of disrepair. So we worked with Aaron at the City of Erie to really start with some baseline understanding of what are conditions of disrepair that are present within the communities. So we know that with Strong Vincent, there's about 12.51% of conditions of disrepair. East, it's a little over 26. McKinley, a little over 20. Pfeiffer Burley, a bit over 27. And Edison, a bit over 12. Now, not all of those schools have been surveyed. You'll see that the highest is a 95% completion rate and the lowest is a 39 or 32% completion rate. So the city is still gathering statistics on that. But we wanted to use those statistics to say, okay, if we're trying to combat conditions of disrepair, we should have an understanding of what those conditions are in each one of those schools. But also we wanted to make sure that we're focused on combating some of the predatory advertising that is present in these neighborhoods. We have advertisements for payday lending, bail bonds, alcohol products, tobacco products, etc. And if you're a child walking past this multiple times a day, it's being subjected to you that this is normal conditions. These are what you should expect and that these are part of your normal everyday life. So our goal was really making sure that we're offsetting that by more or less creating large-scale visual art galleries. We believe heavily in the benefits of personal development that come from engaging with the arts, but we also recognize that when it comes to institutional interaction with the arts, there are many barriers, whether perceived or real, that prevent certain portions of our population from enjoying the benefits of the institutions that are here in Erie. And our thoughts were, is if we make these more available at the neighborhood level, one, a wider portion of our population gets to enjoy the benefit, but two, how are we helping demystify the arts so that more people see themselves as the intended benefits of the programs and services that are provided at the institutional level as well? So we have a model that I'm pretty proud of and I think is unique to Erie Arts and Culture and unique to our region. So we really wanted to focus on professional mentorship of artists living and working in Erie, as well as paid opportunities for artists living and working in Erie. So with ours, with every 10 murals we do, approximately 50% are awarded to Erie-based artists to serve as the lead artists. So they're coming up with the concepts, they're leading the design process, and inevitably it's their name that is associated with the project. In addition to that though, 50% of the projects go to artists from outside of our community, whether they're national or international. And in doing so, for every visiting artist we bring in, we pair them with 2 to 4 Erie-based artists who are interested in learning how to create murals, but haven't historically had an opportunity to do so. And through this pairing, they learn every stage of how to create a mural, from engaging the community, to coming up with a concept, to submitting a order, to the actual painting of the mural. And then in addition to that, we focus on the development of soft skills. With our Erie-based artists, our objective is to work with career and dreams, and this is an area I think we can expand upon more next year. But when we have Erie-based artists, pairing them with teens in our community as a teen summer job program, where through that, they're learning the soft skills that will benefit them no matter what their career trajectory is later in life. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we do wish to improve the visual landscape. So that's the focus of our model in particular. And I'm going to share some of the quantifiables that we've achieved through the first 13 murals that were created over a 4-month period. And the first is that we created 13 murals, and those murals resulted in 21 different paid opportunities. Those paid opportunities totaled 109,000. 66% of which went to artists living and working in Erie. 8 of the 13 lead artists we worked with were either female, trans, or non-binary. And then similarly, 16 of the 21 artist assistants we worked with were female, trans, or non-binary. In addition to that, 7 of the 13 lead artists we worked with and 11 of the 21 artist assistants we worked with were BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, or person of color. And we felt that that was really important to have equity and representation in the work, because if you're working with diverse artists creating the work, you're ensuring that the work that's being created is diverse and better represents the community as a whole. So now we're going to show some before and after photos of the projects and tell a little bit about each one. So this is at the corner of 11th and Weschler. It's a large retaining wall. As you can see, it was previously heavily tagged and then buffed over, so the wall was pretty multiple tones, I guess you could say. But what you don't see from this photo in particular is there's a lot of housing that looks directly out at this wall. And imagine if you had to look out every single day at this giant, brutal piece of concrete. So we worked with multiple artists, many of whom are in the room today. We have Sarah Howard and Precious in the back. They were part of this. They worked underneath Nicole Salgar, who's from Miami. And over a period of about 12 days, if I'm not mistaken, they transformed that brutal piece of concrete into this. And that was the very first project that we did this year as part of Purposeful Placemaking. And, you know, I'm sure that if anybody wants to speak with Sarah or Precious after this, they could share some of their personal accounts. But I remember one day in particular, we were there and a woman came up to us and she shared that she'd lived in that neighborhood her whole entire life. And she came up in tears and she was just so excited. And she said, "I can't believe my neighborhood is getting this." And I remember the first response I had to her is, why not your neighborhood? Why is your neighborhood any less deserving than any other neighborhood where we see investments being made? But in addition to that, it starts other conversations, right? Beyond public art, what do you feel your neighborhood should have that it's presently lacking? And maybe these aren't things that Erie Arts and Culture or the United Way controls, but I guarantee you we're in the room and at the table with others who can have an influence in these areas. So these projects help individuals start to think about their neighborhoods a little bit differently, and then also elevates their expectations for what they can hold others accountable for that their neighborhoods maybe are lacking but should by all means have. The other great thing about this project when we finished, and when you're doing a project like this over a period of 10 days, 12 days, however many days it took, a lot of times the residents are coming out each and every day to check in. And one gentleman across the way in particular, when we finished this mural, came out and said, I've already talked to my neighbors, we got our eye on this. We're making sure nobody's tagging it. And there's this sense of ownership and accountability that comes from it. And oftentimes the question we get is how does the community help shape what is inevitably a gift to the community? And we'll start by talking about this one in particular, because Nicole knew she wanted to have a theme that looked at transformational generation, because she looked at our West Bayfront's master plan, and she looked at how sustainability was an element of that plan, and how a community transfers from one generation to the next is a part of sustainability. So she had a few concepts and a few questions that she asked to the community, and she asked the community to provide input to help shape the design. So one of the things that she asked is, what do you feel is a unique attribute of your neighborhood that you're really proud of? And they said their front porches. A lot of folks felt like their front porches is where a community was being built. And this is also an area that participates in Porch Fest annually, and that's why the houses with the porches are included in that. This mural in particular is also a block away from where the tragic daycare fire occurred just a few years prior. And that was a lot of the input that we received from community residents was that neighborhood's history based off of that one experience. And we didn't feel like we were equipped to do a trauma-informed approach to a memorial mural, but there are 5 seeds there that are being passed from one hand to the next, and those represent the 5 lives that were lost through that project, or I'm sorry, through that tragedy. We asked the community to talk about what birds they felt they had most present in their neighborhood, which was why the oriole was there. We talked about flowers that were present, which is why the morning glories are there. And then talking about that transformation, on the far right side you have the chrysalis, and on the far left side you have that butterfly. So again, talking about transformation at a neighborhood level. So the second project we did was at the Remnant Store, which has been around for, I think, 58 years, if I'm not mistaken. It's on the corner of 11th and German. Judy, who owns it, is an absolute delight. Probably also the easiest yes I ever received. I had no relationship with her. I called her up one day and said, I'd like to do a mural on your building. And she said, yes. And I said, at least let me come in and try to sell you because I feel like I have to. But as you can see, pretty uninspiring wall. And the Remnant Store is a silent giant in our community. They've been around for so long that I think every fiber artist is aware of them, but they also donate a lot of materials to places like the Inner City Neighborhood Art House, the Erie Art Museum, and others. In addition to that, they've never raised their prices. Ever since Judy's father owned it over 50 plus years ago, the prices have stayed and remain the same even today. And that's something Judy's really proud of. So we had multiple artists work with Emily Ding from Los Angeles, including Doug and Callie, who are not here today because they're educators themselves. But over a period of about 10 days, they also transformed that into this. And with the community engagement that occurred with this project, a lot of the neighborhood residents talked about this collaborative feeling of building something. They really wanted to focus on that collaborative building of home. And Emily felt like that could best be represented by birds building a nest together. But also, given the nature of the store, you see some fabric elements woven into that design. And there's a really great sentiment about this project in particular that was shared in Erin Phillips' article in the Erie Reader, where she interviews Judy after this project's complete. And one of the things that Judy shares is that they recognize, that block recognizes now that there's a mural there, there's more people coming into that block. And the neighbor next door has started to organize Saturday cleanups of yards and porches because they want to make sure that the neighborhood is presentable when folks are coming in to check out the neighborhood. And that is typically one of the things that we see when we do a project like this, is that the sense of pride in a neighborhood tends to increase, but you also tend to see additional investments made at or around the site where the mural is done. So for instance, a couple years ago we did a mural on the International Market, and they installed new lighting afterwards, which also improves safety. But some of the other large-scale projects we've done, we've seen massive redevelopment projects within the site within about 18 months after we completed the mural. So we do know that murals tend to stimulate additional investments in community redevelopment. So this is on 12th and Ash. It's the future home of Curry Point, which is a takeout curry restaurant. And as you can see, pretty uninspiring wall. When Sam bought that building, he intentionally painted it white because previous to that it was painted quite dark, and they actually had cars run into the building on 3 different occasions because people fly down Ash Street. So one of our objectives with this project was, one, we want it to be bright because Sam wanted it to be bright, but also recognizing how fast cars travel down Ash Street and knowing that this is a walking route, how can we potentially slow them in their tracks a little bit by way of creating some visual public art. So this project was done, again, with multiple assistants, again, Precious being one of them. And I think this was about a 2-week duration, and that transformed that project into this. And, you know, when we were talking with Sam, who's originally from India, he was talking about the international population that lives around the building, in particular folks from Bhutan, Nepal, etc. And Sam has a little 4-year-old daughter. And one of the things that was really precious is she would stick her head out the window on a daily basis and kind of, you know, talk away at the artist, and in particular Anna. And I remember one morning I was there and I stopped by and she sticks her face against the screen on the window and she goes, "Anna's painting my face! Anna's painting my face!" And she thought that the young girl was her. And it's not her, but it shows the importance of representation and seeing someone that looks like you that you can identify with. And the sense of pride that she was beaming with because she thought she was now a 2-story mural. We also, the house directly across the street invited Anna over to see what the mural looks like from their window. And the woman was talking about how happy she is to look out her bedroom window every day now and see this smiling face. So it shows you, again, the importance of representation, but also how you start to transform the experience of those that live around it. We also have worked really heavily to focus on buildings that have been sites of vandalization. And I do want to say this in particular. I think that any person that is doing something like this just hasn't been brought into the fold yet to allow their talents to be cultivated. They're clearly looking for an outlet for expression, and it's responsibility of organizations like Erie Arts and Culture to try to identify who they are and then work with them to build those talents and provide those outlets so that they can do something that is an asset to the community as opposed to vandalization of private property. But this is just a block away from Anna's mural on 12th and Ash. It's located on 11th and Ash. And it was Caesar Westbrook, along with some community volunteers, including Brian, who's in the audience today, who helped transform this mural into this. And Caesar really wanted to play off of, okay, if people are doing kind of graffiti-inspired work, let's have a graffiti-inspired mural. But in addition to that, how are we reminding people that it's important to play? I think that oftentimes we forget about that. And in some of our neighborhoods, you know, you have to wear that mask, that hardness, as I know Antonio has talked about before in some of his presentations. And we feel like it's really important that we remind folks, whether they're adults or children, that you have to take time out every day and play. And I think that if you can read that, it says PLAY, and there's some silhouettes showing kids in playful acts. The next mural that we did was actually through a class here at ECAT, and it's on a building right across the street, owned by Hands. So with that, Brian Bonner and Steve Mick worked with a group of kids to allow them to completely determine the outcome of their mural. And in that class, they engaged youth to ask, what is the issues that are present in our community that are most important for you that you want to talk about? And gun violence was the #1 issue. And on one of the planning days, the mayor actually attended the class, and we were thankful that he was there, and he could hear from the students, what they felt was going on in their community. And it's my understanding that in particular, 2 students who were involved in this project were personally impacted by gun violence. And that, again, is something that we've seen as a rising issue in our community over the last several years. Do we have any students in the room that were a part of this project? No? Okay. But they worked over a period of, I think, several weeks, maybe 10 days, to actually go through not only saying, okay, how do we translate some of this into visual imagery, but how do we make sure we're not glorifying guns? We know that we want to talk about guns and gun violence, but sometimes if you include imagery of guns, it can feel like you're glorifying it. And this is across the street, and I think the students did a really mature job of raising awareness of the issue, and again, in a way, though, that doesn't glorify guns. So this project was done by Antonio Howard, who's with us today, and it's up on Atkinson's Barber Shop on 21st and Reed. And I think the thing that's really important about places like barber shops is they often do serve as a place for gathering and community building. And coincidentally, I think we painted 2, maybe 3 barber shops through this initiative, which wasn't intended. But I do think that barber shops do serve as a place for community gathering. So Antonio worked closely with the community there, and he wanted to focus on, again, intergenerational conversations. And this was the project that he created. So what our past whispers into the ears of our present. What I couldn't show through this image is that the gentleman who owns this barbershop owns a lot across the street, and Antonio carried the mural over into that street as well, and it's creating a hall of fame for individuals past who have done great things in our community, but also leaves open space for children of present to achieve great things and see their names added to that wall as well. And one of the things I want to talk about Antonio's project, not to put him on the spot, but since he's in the room, there's so many different approaches to mural making, and there's no one right approach. Every artist has their own approach, and it's whatever works best for them, as well as the wall and the community where it's going. And I do want to recognize one thing I really appreciate about Antonio's approach, which I think is very similar with Tom Ferraro's approach and others who have been doing this work, is that you get the community involved and you get them joining you in the act of painting. And, anytime you see a project being done by Antonio, it's almost like he's a carnival barker, but not as aggressive, but trying to get folks to pick up a brush and participate. And I think Antonio takes this really inclusive approach that nothing can be done that can't be undone. The mistakes add character, but they can also be glossed over if necessary. And, if you've ever watched Antonio work, the amount of community hands that go on a project is always super impressive. And I know that's, again, Tom Ferraro's approach as well. And I just really want to commend artists that take that approach, because when folks can point to something that they physically had a hand in creating, inevitably the ownership of it long term and the pride in it long term is elevated. So I do want to recognize those approaches and commend you all for those approaches. So this was a wall, again, right down the street on 8th Street. It was a visiting artist, Alex, from Indiana, and we had Jessica and Bella as artist assistants on this. We found out when doing our research on this building that in the early 1900s, late 1800s, I think, it was a movie theater. It was the East Avenue Movie Theater. So working with Alex, we wanted to build something that represented the old test patterns that were used in early days of analog technology. And, again, wanting to show the different forms that arts can take, from, literal narrative and figurative pieces to landscape to abstract. And I think this one in particular is quite fun because it does create a large-scale abstract approach. And this was the 3rd mural we created this summer or the last 2 summers on East Avenue, and ties into the greater initiative being led by organizations like ECAT and others to revitalize East Avenue as a commercial corridor. And I can't say enough about Sean and Kenya Johnson, who we worked with, who are the property owners for this. It's a lot like working with Judy at the Remnant store, where the yes was so easy, but then they were so supportive every step of the project, as was the neighborhood businesses and other folks there as well. So this one is another barbershop. Again, it's 2 of 3 barbershops we painted this year unintentionally, and it was done by Jay Amatangelo, who's in the room today. This was Jay's first outdoor mural, and Jay also did a great job of engaging community members, one of whom is Jasmine, who's in the room today. And I think creating these opportunities for others to get involved and to participate and help shape it is, again, a really beautiful thing. And with this one in particular, when talking with Jay about some outstanding goals and objectives with it, we recognize it's right across the street from elementary school, and thinking about, at different grade levels, learning to identify letters, but then using the letters that are present in the mural as almost like a jumble, a word jumble, and asking students, how many words can you spell and form using the letters that are hidden throughout this mural? But I do want to talk a little bit about Jasmine as well, who I'll talk about in Kathy's mural as well. But I think when we talk about community building and the ways that murals can participate in that, when Jay's doing this, he's out there every single day, and inevitably people see him and stop and ask questions. Same with any muralist. And Jasmine was one of those individuals. And Jasmine, you were only in Erie for what, like a week at most at the point in time? Less than a week, right? So we have someone that moved here from Texas, is here for less than a week, and doesn't necessarily know whether or not she's going to stay here. And she's here now. And I think it's because projects like this can welcome people in and give them an opportunity to contribute. And not only did Jasmine serve as an assistant on Jay's, but she also served as a paid assistant on Kathy's later on, which we'll show here in a little bit. But I think that ability to build community and find others that are like-minded or like-talented as you, and then help you acclimate to a new community is incredibly, incredibly important, and very visual projects like this can assist in that. So it's also really important, I think, to, again, as we talked about reminding people to play, is reminding people of our inner child. And, a building like this that's pretty easy to overlook prior, through the creative act, gets transformed into something like this. And I guarantee that most people probably never recognized or saw or noticed this utility building that sat beside CVS on Parade Street. But one of my greatest moments of joy when I'm driving down 12th Street now is when I'm nearing that intersection of Parade and I can look off to the left and I see this mural. And it's just such a vibrant pop of color. And, I think people have gravitated towards this one in particular because it is so playful. And it is also recognizing a community celebrity in that, again, Brian. For those that don't know, Brian is a really remarkable person in our community. He used to be a delivery boy for Jimmy John's and really wanted to focus on how does he bring joy to others. So every day he would dress up in a different costume when delivering subs on his bicycle, as just as a means to provide joy to others. He also works as a mascot, and it was interesting because the first time I talked with Brian and I asked him, "What's your dream job?" and he said, "Make-A-Wish." And I thought that really tells me this person's character. This altruistic person. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was your birthday when we were doing this project, right? Or was it close? No? Okay, never mind. But regardless, it wasn't a birthday present, but we still, when thinking about how do we add a local touch to a project that's being led by an out-of-town artist, we made sure that we added Brian into this mural. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice that Brian is in there. I will talk a little bit more about the importance of representation, because I had another community member pull me aside at the gym a couple weeks ago, and I won't say his name because I don't want to embarrass him. But he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, I saw that mural on Parade Street. Is that me in the upper right-hand corner?" I hated to break it to him that it wasn't, and I told him that it was Brian. But again, representation matters, and I think moments like this really reinstate that. So we also work to transform the Bleak. This is a warehouse that's on 11th and Reed. And what you don't see in this image is that the other side of this looks very similar. And with this project in particular, we knew we could only do one side of the building, but we didn't want to just touch one side and leave the other side in this type of condition. And we had a really great community support by Fernandez Pressure Washing and Painting. They came by and they pressure washed and primed, and then we had artists in our community assist us as paid assistants in painting the other side. So this building now looks like a brand new building altogether, but we took that and we transformed it into this. And with this one in particular, you know, it's funny because it's funny how sometimes the concepts and designs come about, because Sean Thurston came up here for this project. And again, so much of our community input, when we were talking with community members, whether they were business owners or residents, about what do you want, we just kept hearing, I don't care, I just want it to be colorful, which doesn't give you a lot of direction all the time. But we were out there and talking, and two young women walked by, I'd say probably middle school age, and I said, hey, what's your favorite animals? One said a tiger, the other said a dolphin. And Sean and I were like, a salamander's kind of a marriage between a dolphin and a tiger, where it's got the slipperiness of a dolphin and then the marks of a tiger. But in particular, Sean picked a salamander because of the stories he was hearing from the community about being able to be restorative. So with salamanders, they can snap their tails off and their tails grow back, but there's also symbolism and imagery about a salamander being able to walk through fires unscathed, and there's just this kind of tenacity to them. But at the same time, they're not an intimidating animal, because sometimes when you talk with the community and they want an animal because of what it represents, that animal also sometimes can be quite intimidating. And you know that you don't want to necessarily do something that could also be like ferocious, etc. So that was this project in particular. And Mohammed, who owns the warehouse, was extremely pleased. But like I mentioned, we also completely pressure washed and redid the other side of the building as well. So this project was done by Sarah Jacobs, who again was a brand new artist to our community, had just come up here from Pittsburgh, and shared with us that she had never had such an opportunity in Pittsburgh, and now here, within just a short time of becoming a member of our community, has access to these types of opportunities. It was also her first time ever doing a mural, so I'm appreciative again, I'm going to say Tom Ferraro for sharing his knowledge of how to work with Polytab in particular, as well as Steve Mick for sharing his knowledge and being willing to assist with the install. But with this one, we really wanted to take a bit of a different approach and think about boarded windows. There's a lot of boarded windows in Erie because of conditions of disrepair. And what could those boarded windows be other than just plain boards? So with Sarah's, she worked on Polytab and then installed them in the windows. And I apologize that because of the aspect ratio, we're missing some of the top images. But this is on 25th and Ash. And Sarah used imagery to represent, is it Greek mythology? Greek mythology about the god who was responsible for raising the sun every day. And in particular, through the community feedback we were doing, learning about the importance of black women in their neighborhood and the role that black women they lead, but also sometimes the lack of recognition they get for that work. So recognizing the role and the weight that black women in our neighborhoods carry, and really wanting to show them as the individuals that help make sure that the sun rises every day. And this was this was the 13th mural of this year. There's one more mural that I'll be showing afterwards just for special acknowledgement. But this was done by Kathy Ferraro. Again, first time leading a mural in our community. And, you know, went through a lot of back and forth to kind of say, you're ready for this. You can do this, right? We've got some timelines that we have to appear, and we know it's a big wall. But you're ready for this. And she, again, had really great guidance and assistance from her husband, Tom Ferraro, but also Brian and Jasmine served as paid artist assistants for that project. And in particular, Kathy wanted to focus on the role that dogs play in neighborhoods to help foster connections between people, and how a dog can help you say hello to somebody that otherwise you might not say hello to. So I apologize if it's being flooded out because of the lights right now. But this was also created on a barber shop, again unintentional, but on West 6th Street, right outside of Strong Vincent Middle School. And again, shows, I think, both leisure and play, as well as the role that dogs can play in helping build community. So the last mural, which was not the last mural we created, but the last mural that I'm going to talk about today, is talking about how we more inclusively represent our community's identities. And this one was done on East Lake Road, again, beside Edison Elementary School and right across the street from J.M. Atangalo's mural. And it was Christina Wolf who created this mural. And this is not the first time Christina has participated in the mural, but is, again, another first for leading a mural. And like Antonio and like others that I've mentioned, really invited the community in on this project. Christina worked with some teenagers from Career and Dreams, but also worked with a lot of neighborhood teenagers and children. And I really, again, I just applaud that approach to let anybody pick up a brush and participate. And this one in particular, we received a really touching response from. I always almost cry whenever I read this. I'll try not to today. But, you know, we know that representation is not to the point in our community as it should be. Our community is incredibly diverse. We've been a resettlement city for refugees since the Vietnam War. Of our population of about 100,000, 20% are new Americans from 85 plus different countries of origin. We have a very large African American community as well as a Latinx community. And unfortunately, we have not done a good job of being inclusive and equitable as it relates to our diversity. And I think that we all recognize that and we're working to do better. But many students in our community don't have the ability to see themselves reflected in their teachers, in their administrative staff on a daily basis. Similarly, we don't always see it in our elected officials or leaders of our nonprofit or for-profit community. So representation is an issue that I know we're all working towards and we all play a role in helping address. And this one in particular, the boy on the far right is a young black boy. The woman in the middle is, I would say, a somewhat ambiguous heritage, but definitely of a darker complexion. And then the girl on the right, I think, would probably be identifiable as white passing. And when we finished this mural, we had the news there. And they covered a segment, and they interviewed myself and Christina, and I believe the mayor and a few others. And the next day, I got this email from a mother in our community, Catherine. And she wrote, "Just wanted to send a little note of gratitude for all the great work you and your team are doing within our community. Yesterday, my family was watching WJET, and the mural made by Christina Wolf was showcased. My 2-year-old daughter, August, who is part superhero and part princess, looks at the screen and yells, 'Mama, that's me. It's me, Mama.' I glanced on the screen and saw a beautiful brown girl in a very large mural and replied, 'Yes, baby, that is you.' Living in a community and a neighborhood where we don't see much representation can be hard raising 4 brown children where they don't see themselves represented in the art they consume, the entertainment they watch, or even the teachers who teach them. My daughter saw herself yesterday depicted in the most beautiful way, happy and free.'" And I really want to thank Christina for giving that gift to that girl. And again, we strive for that in darn near every mural by having diverse artists create those murals. So that was what we've created this year, 13 murals over 4 months. Next year, we have 37 murals that we aim to complete between May and October. Those 37 murals will result in 73 or more paid opportunities for artists, of which 74% is estimated to go to Erie-based artists. So this is a $1 million initiative. We have secured over $440,000 in funding to date for this initiative. We have an outstanding $330,000 in pledges or outstanding grants, which if we are awarded all $330,000, that will leave a remaining balance of just shy of $250,000, $225,000 that we need to raise between now and essentially May of next year to achieve our 50 mural goal. But again, that money, the majority of it goes to our community. We buy supplies from paint shops in our community. We rent lifts from equipment companies in our community. And as I mentioned, 74% of the opportunities go to artists in our community. I do want to recognize those who have generously provided funding to this initiative, as well as those who have provided in-kind support, including Sherwin-Williams Commercial Paint of Downtown and Fernandez Painting and Pressure Washing. Our platinum benefactors for this initiative were the City of Erie through an American Rescue Plan grant, as well as the Erie Community Foundation through their Shaping Tomorrow program. We also have Erie Insurance, who has supported us through gifts. We also have bronze benefactors that include Tim and Lisa Nicastro, Robin Shepner, the Zaffris Family Limited Partnership, Tom Hagen, Gene Davis Sales and Service, and Doug and Deb Murphy. And lastly, our champion donors, which is anybody that was over $1,000. We have Keith and Kelly Kennedy, Michelle Butler, Jay and Mona Kang, Brian and Linda Graff, Tom and Carol Tapizza, Jason Walker, and David Bennett. So that's it for today. And I want to thank you for your attention, as well as all those who have contributed to this project. If you're looking for ways that you can contribute moving forward, if you know artists who you think would be a good fit for this initiative, either as a lead artist or as an artist assistant, please connect them with Erie Arts and Culture. In addition to that, if you'd like to make a financial contribution to this initiative, we certainly welcome that. It's through community participation financially that we can make an initiative like this possible. But also, if you know of a building along a walking route that you think would be an interesting location for a mural, please also let us know. We have 37 murals for next year, which means 37 buildings that we have to secure. All of them are along walking routes, and we're now working with Gannon and Dr. Chris Magno to look at actually density of walkers to figure out where is the most strategic places along the walking routes to install them. So if you want to contribute in any of those ways, we certainly welcome it. But other than that, I'd be happy to take any questions from those that are in the audience today. None? Well, I want to thank you all for your time. I encourage you to engage with the artists in the room if you haven't done so already. And thank you so much for your time and attention. Oh, do we have some students? Okay, so we have students from East Middle School with us today. And I think if there's any students who are brave enough that want to come up and speak on the mic, you're welcome to share what it's meant to you to have new artwork available to you as you walk to and from school. No? That's okay. Yeah.
Where can you find the video, the recording of this? Where will that be?
So that is right now being live streamed on Erie Arts and Culture and the United Way's Facebook pages. Also, if you go to Erie Arts and Culture's website, which is erieartsandculture.org, we have a page dedicated to purposeful placemaking, where we have all of the artists who have participated so far, as well as a Google map that has all 13 murals. So you can actually find those and enjoy them in person. But in addition to that, we also have an artist statement for every mural. So on our website, probably not, but it will be on our Facebook. Yep. Any other questions? Well, again, I want to thank you for your time and attention today, and I want to thank again our Frank Media as well as Grisey for assisting us in making this possible, and the United Way for being a great partner in this initiative.